The Trout in the Eel Reeve, a painting by Charles Napier Hemy, who lived between 1841 and 1917. This picture was painted around 1890. There is an old saying that says a picture is worth 1,000 words. There may well be some truth in this. Indeed, some pictures have had thousands upon thousands of words expended upon them. This picture, the trout in the Eel Reeve, falls into a group which may broadly be called conversation pieces. Every time you look at them, you see another intriguing little detail. Of course, in these days of moving pictures, we're less able to expend the kind of time that really viewing a picture like this requires. We like simple, moving images which are self-explanatory. So what is this picture all about? At its most basic, it's a view of a river. A trap has been set to catch eels, but, by accident, it has caught some trout. A woman looks out of a shelter at the dying fish in the trap. It's probably high summer. The trees are in full leaf, and a couple of little birds flit around the trees which shelter the river. When we look at this picture, we like to fondly imagine that we are communicating with the artist. He is sending us a message across the years, just as if he'd written a letter to us. But in fact we're wrong. We're not having our conversation with the artist, we are having it with ourselves. The world we look on in this picture we see with different eyes to the artist. They may not be too different, but they're not the same. It is relatively likely that the market for which the artist intended this picture is the newly forming class of rich middle-class people. They wanted to hang pictures like this in their spacious suburban villas. They were often tied to the city by their business interests. They owned shops and businesses. They were not living in some stately ancestral seat in the countryside, but possibly they wished that they did, and for them this picture summons up thoughts of rural living to which they aspired, but will never probably be able to have. Is that what art is called to mind in us? I doubt it. If anything, we see it as an evocation of the countryside which is rapidly disappearing around us into town and city life. So although we see the same picture, we do not necessarily interpret it in the same way as our forefathers. At the outset I said this was a conversation piece. I have already expended almost 500 words and still said almost nothing. What are we to make of the trout and the eel, and indeed the young lady watching them? Is she really just gawping at the death throes of the fish? Because this is a conversation piece, we are entitled to explore our feelings when we view the picture. Should we feel sympathy for the fish? Most people don't claim to have any particular attachment to fish in the way that they would to cats and dogs and rabbits and other fur balls. Indeed, there's a general failure to recognise fishing as a blood sport because we don't empathise with fish. After all, you can't hear them screaming. There is a particular lack of sympathy for eels because of their snake-like appearance and their slimy skin. We don't necessarily see them as fish at all, although they are. At least the trout have their highly coloured skins, and the young lady looks out over the eel trap, possibly showing some sorrow for the peacock-coloured trout who have died in a trap designated for the serpentine eels. What of the little birds that flutter through our scene? In some parables, little birds flying into the light before vanishing again is seen as a metaphor for human life. The length of a human life is but a brief spark in the context of the passage of time. If we take this theme, we're able to suggest that the picture represents a discussion about the nature of life. We see that, despite everything, there comes a time when mortal flesh is taken from the river of life, and whether peacock-like, as with the trout, or serpentine, like the eels, its brief passage comes to an end. Perhaps the young lady, in the midst of a verdant summer, is contemplating the transitory nature of life. The summer will end, and so too will life. It may seem to you that this interpretation of the picture is possibly just a little too extravagant, and you will be asking yourself, is it correct? Well, it may annoy you to learn that it does not matter. Your opinion is every bit as valid as mine. But it comes to the point that I made at the outset. This picture is a conversation piece. It hung on the wall of some well-to-do villa, and the owner wanted his money's worth. He wanted a picture that he could look at and contemplate and speculate about. In Victorian Britain there were no moving pictures. There was no television. So art lovers had to crowd their walls with pictures which rewarded a good look. It's all too easy to walk past this painting in a gallery and just say, oh look, that's a nice landscape. But this picture falls, like so many, into a condition called the conversation piece, and it rewards a viewing by telling of at least 1,000 different stories.